The rain fell hard that morning in Providence, streaking the courthouse windows like silent tears. Inside, Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his robe and glanced over the docket. A list of routine cases: parking violations, expired meters, late payments. Nothing unusual. Just another day of quiet justice. But he didn't know that before this day ended, his courtroom and his heart would never be the same. The clerk called the next case. The doors creaked open. A young woman stepped forward, her shoulders tense beneath a worn gray coat. Beside her walked a little girl, no taller than the judge's bench, with wide brown eyes and a grip that refused to let go of her mother's hand. The child wasn't trembling out of fear. No. There was something else, a calm, fragile determination that made even the officers turn their heads. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Good morning," he said gently. "Who do we have here?" The mother spoke softly. "Your Honor, this is my daughter, Emma." Emma lifted her chin. Her voice, barely louder than a whisper, filled the courtroom. "I wanted to come today, sir. I have something to say." The judge blinked, surprised. It wasn't every day a child addressed the bench. The courtroom, usually a place of routine and formality, fell into an almost sacred silence. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Caprio smiled faintly. "And what is it you'd like to tell me, young lady?" Emma hesitated, eyes darting to her mother. Then she stepped forward, her small shoes squeaking on the polished floor. She clasped something in her hands, a folded piece of paper, slightly crumpled and wet from the rain. "I made a wish," she said. "But I can't make it come true without your help." The judge's expression softened. "A wish?" "Yes," she said, her voice trembling now. "It's for my mom." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The clerk froze mid-note. The bailiff leaned in. And for a brief moment, every case, every file, every number on that docket disappeared, replaced by one question hanging heavy in the air. What kind of wish could bring an 8-year-old girl into a courtroom? Judge Caprio didn't know yet, but he could feel it already. Something extraordinary was about to happen. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly, studying the woman standing before him. She looked exhausted, not just tired, but drained in a way that life itself seemed to weigh on her shoulders. Her coat was soaked, her hair pulled back hastily, and her eyes, though kind, carried the quiet panic of someone used to surviving one day at a time. He glanced at the file. "Maria Alvarez," he read aloud. 3 unpaid parking citations, all over 30 days old. Totaling $165. Maria nodded, barely speaking. "Yes, Your Honor." Caprio's voice softened. "You understand you were required to appear today because of the outstanding balance?" She swallowed hard. "I know, sir. I was trying to pay. But I couldn't." Her daughter, Emma, squeezed her hand. The judge noticed the gesture, small but telling. "Ms. Alvarez," he said, leaning forward, "tell me a little about yourself. Where do you work?" Maria hesitated, unsure if honesty might make things worse. "I clean offices during the day," she said quietly. "And at night I take care of elderly patients. Sometimes both jobs overlap." "So 2 jobs." She nodded again. "Yes. I sleep maybe 3-4 hours. My car helps me get between the 2. Judge Caprio looked down at the citations. "These tickets, one was at a hospital parking zone, another at a downtown lot, and one near City Hall." Maria nodded. "The hospital one. I was visiting a patient. He passed away that night. I forgot to move my car." The courtroom was still. Even the clerk paused her typing. Caprio sighed, setting the papers aside. "Maria, I see these all the time. People think a few tickets don't matter. But you don't strike me as careless." "I'm not, sir," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I just didn't have the money. And if I don't have my car, I lose both jobs. I can't afford the fines or the towing." The judge looked at the little girl beside her. "And you, young lady, you wanted to come today?" Emma nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. Mommy didn't want me to. But I told her I had to." "Why's that?" Caprio asked. Emma's answer was simple, but it cut straight through the room. "Because I wanted you to see she's a good person. She helps people every day. Even when she's tired. I just wanted to help her today." The judge's eyes softened, his voice now barely above a whisper. "You believe I can help her?" Emma nodded. "You help people on TV. You listen. I thought, maybe you'd listen to us too." A quiet murmur filled the courtroom. For the first time that morning, the rain outside began to ease, as if the storm itself paused to listen. And behind his bench, Judge Caprio felt it, that familiar ache of compassion that no law book could ever explain. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his voice soft but curious. "Emma, would you like to tell me what your wish was? You said you couldn't make it come true without my help." The little girl nodded slowly. Her small fingers fidgeted with the paper she held. "Yes, sir. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget." She unfolded the paper with careful hands, flattening the damp creases on the desk before her. The judge watched as she took a shaky breath, her eyes never leaving his. "My wish," she began, her voice fragile but clear, "is that my mom doesn't get in trouble today, because today is her birthday." A quiet gasp spread through the courtroom. Maria covered her mouth, her eyes widening in disbelief. She whispered, "Emma?" But the girl kept going, her courage trembling but unbroken. "She's been sad for a long time," Emma continued. "Every night she comes home and says she's sorry for being tired. She works so much. I wanted her to be happy today. So I wished that someone would be nice to her, just once." For a moment nobody moved. The sound of the old ceiling fan seemed deafening in the silence. Judge Caprio's expression changed, not the usual stern look of authority, but the face of a grandfather hearing something sacred. "Emma," he said gently, "that's a beautiful wish." The little girl nodded, but there was more. "And I brought something too." She reached into the small backpack she carried and pulled out a plastic jar, the kind used for peanut butter, its label peeled off. Inside was a collection of coins, nickels, dimes, a few quarters, clinking softly as she set it on the table. "I've been saving it," she said proudly, "for when Mommy needed help. I thought maybe I could pay some of the money she owes." Maria's tears fell freely now. She bent down, holding her daughter close, whispering, "No, baby, you don't have to do that." But Emma shook her head. "I want to." The judge exhaled slowly, overwhelmed. His eyes glistened as he looked from the child to her mother. "Emma," he said quietly, "do you know how much money that is?" The girl shrugged. "Not enough. But it's what I have." The room was utterly still, lawyers, officers, even the camera crew. No one dared break the moment. Caprio leaned back, his voice thick with emotion. "Friends," he said to the courtroom, "I've been on this bench a long time. I've seen anger, guilt, and regret. But I have never seen anything like this. A little girl who believes kindness can pay a debt." The bailiff turned away, blinking hard. And then Caprio looked back at Emma and said softly, maybe today your wish will come true." Because in that instant, every adult in the room realized, this wasn't about fines anymore. It was about love, innocence, and the kind of justice that can't be written into any law. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, his voice now almost a whisper. "Emma," he said gently, "can you tell me how much you've saved in your jar?" The little girl looked down, twisting the lid open carefully. "I don't know, sir," she said shyly. "But I counted once. It was $9.23. She turned the jar upside down, emptying it onto the desk. The coins scattered, small metallic clinks echoing through the quiet courtroom. Quarters, dimes, nickels, each one a symbol of sacrifice, of innocence that refused to give up. Judge Caprio stared at the pile. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then he said softly, $9.23. He repeated the words as if tasting their weight. "That's a fortune in kindness." Maria, standing beside her daughter, covered her face. "Emma," she whispered through tears, "you were saving that for your school trip." "I don't care," the little girl said firmly. "I want you to be happy." The room was silent. No shuffling papers, no coughs, no restless murmurs. Every person in that courtroom was watching something rare. A child teaching the world what justice could mean. Caprio straightened, his usually steady hands trembling slightly. "Emma," he said, "what you just did, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in this courtroom." He turned to the clerk. "How much does she owe total?" $165, Your Honor." The judge leaned back, sighing deeply. "You see this?" he said, turning toward the courtroom cameras, his voice breaking. This right here, is what justice looks like. Not punishment, not power, but love." The words hung in the air like a prayer. He looked down again at the coins. $9.23 toward 165, he murmured. "That's not enough for the system. But it's enough for the soul." He paused as if deciding something unspoken. "Let's take a short recess," he said quietly. "I need a moment." But before he could rise, something unexpected happened. From the back row, a man in a construction uniform stood up. He walked to the front, holding out a folded bill. "Judge," he said, "put this toward her fine. My daughter's about her age. I can't sit here and not help." Caprio blinked, startled. Then another hand rose, an elderly woman clutching her purse. "I'll add 20, she said, voice trembling. And then another and another. One by one, people from all corners of the room, strangers from different lives, races, jobs, came forward. A police officer placed a $20 bill on the bench. A lawyer added 50. Someone whispered, "God bless them." Within minutes, a pile of bills and coins covered the desk where only Emma's jar had been. The bailiff, normally stoic, turned away to wipe his eyes. The clerk sniffled quietly, her fingers shaking as she tried to count. When the total reached $165, Judge Caprio exhaled deeply, removing his glasses. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice unsteady, "the fine has been paid, not by one person but by everyone here." He looked back at Emma. "You see, young lady, your wish came true, because you reminded us all what kindness looks like." The courtroom erupted in gentle applause. Maria sobbed into her hands and Emma smiled shyly as if unsure what she'd done. And for the first time in a long time, even the walls of that old courtroom seemed to breathe, alive with something far greater than law. It was mercy multiplied by a child's heart. The following morning, the city of Providence woke up to a story that no headline could fully capture. Local news anchors called it, "The Courtroom Miracle." A child's $9.23 had done more than clear a fine. It had touched the conscience of an entire community. By noon, flowers began arriving at the courthouse. Notes scribbled by strangers read, "For the little girl who reminded us to care," and, "Tell Emma the world is proud of her." A bakery sent cupcakes for her birthday. A local mechanic offered free repairs for Maria's car. And soon, envelopes began to arrive, some with $5, some with hundreds, all carrying one simple message: use this for the next person who needs it. Inside his chambers, Judge Frank Caprio sat at his desk, turning the small clear jar over in his hands. The label was gone, but he had written something new on it in black ink: Emma's jar, the price of compassion. The coins still rattled softly inside, a sound he said reminded him of rain, constant, humble, and cleansing. When a reporter asked him what made this case different, Caprio smiled gently. "Justice isn't a machine," he said. "It's a heartbeat. And sometimes, it takes a child to remind us that mercy is part of the law too." That evening, Maria and Emma returned to the courthouse to thank everyone. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and the little girl looked up at the judge with those same brave eyes. "Did I do good?" she asked him softly. He knelt beside her and said, "You did more than good, Emma. You made grown men cry, and you reminded all of us to be better." She giggled and he smiled, placing the jar back on his desk where it would stay, a small monument to humanity. As the courthouse emptied that night, Judge Caprio looked around the silent room and whispered to himself, "If one little girl can move a courtroom, what else can kindness change?" Friends, stories like this don't just belong in courtrooms, they belong in our hearts. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, sends ripples we may never see. Somewhere, someone right now might be waiting for the same kind of mercy Emma gave her mother. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in goodness again. Because maybe, just maybe, the next miracle begins with you. And as the narrator's voice fades, the screen lingers on the image of Judge Caprio's desk, the jar glinting softly under the courtroom lights. Then the voice returns, calm but curious. Next time, a man stands before the same judge, but his story will test the meaning of forgiveness in ways no one expects. The screen fades to black. A heartbeat of silence. And then just 3 words appear. To be continued.